The 32nd floor had a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of an empty building or a room after an argument. It was the silence of money. The kind that gets installed along with the climate control and the frosted glass and the artwork that nobody actually looks at. Howard Bassett had been fixing things in buildings like this for 22 years, and he still noticed it every time the elevator doors opened onto a floor like this one. That particular hush, that feeling of air that had been filtered one too many times. He checked the work order again. Suite 3201, Chief Executive Officer, computer won't boot, priority call. Howard was not the kind of man people expected to see step off an elevator on the 32nd floor. He was 54 years old, wore a gray Carhartt jacket that had been through more winters than he could count, and carried a tool bag that was older than some of the associates who would pass him in the hall without making eye contact. He kept his hair cut short and his beard trimmed close, both of them gone nearly white in the last few years. He drove a 2009 pickup truck with a cracked dashboard and a heater that worked fine as long as you didn't need it right away. None of that was an accident. He found the suite at the end of the hall, past a receptionist who looked up from her desk with the particular expression people reserved for someone who had arrived through the wrong entrance. Howard smiled at her. He had a good smile, the kind that arrived slowly and meant something, and told her his name and why he was there. She made a phone call, spoke quietly. Then she told him to wait. He waited. He was good at waiting. He stood near the window at the end of the hall and looked out at the city spread below him. The rooftops and the water towers and the distant glint of the river. And he thought about his daughter, Lily, who had a science project due Thursday and who had asked him that morning if clouds had feelings. He had told her he didn't know. She had seemed satisfied with that. Mr. Bassett. He turned. The woman standing in the doorway of Suite 3201 was not what he had been expecting, though he would have been hard-pressed to say exactly what he had been expecting. She was perhaps 45, slender, with dark hair pulled back in a way that was efficient rather than decorative. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white shirt, no jewelry except a single thin watch. Her posture was the posture of someone who had spent years being looked at and had decided, somewhere along the way, that she would control the terms of it. "I'm Beverly Crane," she said. "Thank you for coming up so quickly." "Howard Bassett," he said. "Let's see what we've got." The office was large and spare. A desk of dark wood, a credenza, 2 chairs for visitors that probably cost more than Howard's truck. One wall was almost entirely glass, and the city beyond it looked like something that had been arranged on purpose. Beverly Crane's computer sat on the desk like a patient in a waiting room, present but not participating. Howard set his bag down and pulled the tower out from under the desk without being asked. He checked the power supply first, then the connections, then booted it into diagnostic mode. Beverly Crane stood by the window with her arms crossed lightly at her chest, watching the city. "It happened yesterday afternoon," she said without turning. "In the middle of a presentation. Any warning before it went down?" It slowed. Then it froze. Then it went black. Howard nodded. He'd heard this story 1,000 times. He began working. The office was quiet in the way those offices always were, but he was aware of her presence in it. The small sounds of her breathing, the occasional shift of her weight. Most executives, in his experience, either hovered anxiously or disappeared entirely. Beverly Crane did neither. She simply remained. It was, he noticed, its own kind of confidence. 30 minutes passed. He found the issue, a failed drive sector and a corrupted boot partition, and began the process of repair. He pulled a spare drive from his bag and started the data migration that would take another 45 minutes, give or take. "It'll run for a while," he said. "You don't have to stay." "I have calls in an hour," she said. "I'll stay." She moved to her desk and opened a laptop, began working from that instead. Howard settled back onto the floor beside the tower and let the migration run, watching the progress bar with the patience of a man who has long since made peace with the pace of things. That was when his own phone buzzed, a reminder. He silenced it without looking, but the notification lit the screen for just long enough, and the screen happened to be tilted just wrong, and Beverly Crane glanced up from her laptop at exactly the wrong moment. Not at his phone, at his screen. At the photo that appeared as his lock screen wallpaper, he saw her look. She saw him see her look. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Howard picked up his phone and turned it face down. His daughter smiled up at him in his memory. The photo taken last July at the lake, Lily in a yellow swimsuit, laughing at something off camera. Water still bright on her shoulders. "Your daughter," Beverly Crane said. Her voice had shifted slightly. Not softer exactly, but different. "Yes," Howard said. "How old?" 8-9 in February. Beverly Crane looked back at her laptop. Howard looked back at the progress bar. The migration was at 31%. "She looks like she was having a good day," Beverly said. "She usually is," Howard said. "She's better at that than I am." He hadn't meant to say that last part. It came out before he could decide whether to say it. He kept his eyes on the monitor. Beverly Crane said nothing for a moment, then, "Does she know you think that?" The question was unexpected. Howard looked up. Beverly was not looking at him. She was looking at her laptop screen, but her fingers had gone still on the keyboard. "I tell her she's brave," Howard said slowly. "I'm not sure I tell her she's better at things than I am." "You should," Beverly said. And that was all she said. They returned to their respective silences. Howard turned the words over quietly. There was something in the way she had said it. Not advice, not sentiment. Something that came from somewhere particular. He didn't ask where. The migration climbed to 58%. 62. At some point, Howard stood and stretched his back and walked to the window to give his eyes a break from the screen. The city below was the same city he had driven through that morning at 7:15 with Lily in the back seat eating a granola bar and asking about clouds. But from up here it looked composed and still, like a painting of itself. "Do you live close to here?" Beverly Crane asked. She was still at her desk. She wasn't looking at him. 40 minutes, he said. "Out toward Millhaven." She nodded. He didn't know if she knew where Millhaven was. He suspected she didn't. It was the kind of town that people from this building did not have reason to know about. "I grew up about that far out," she said. "Different direction." Howard turned from the window. "You don't say. You sound surprised. I suppose I am a little." Beverly looked at him then, directly for the first time since he'd arrived. There was something in it. Not challenge, not irritation. Something more like appraisal. Like she was deciding whether to be offended and had decided, for the moment, not to be. "People from out of town run companies too," she said. "I know that," he said. "My father ran 300 acres and 12 employees and never once left the county." Something shifted in her expression. He couldn't have named it. "What did he grow?" she asked. "Corn, some soybeans." Later, when the margins got bad, he switched to hay. Howard paused. He was better at it than the numbers ever showed. Beverly was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father ran a hardware store for 31 years. He never made much, but everyone in town knew his name." Howard nodded. "That's worth something." "It is?" she said, and there was something in those two words that was not as simple as they sounded. The progress bar reached 87%. Howard went back to the monitor. Beverly went back to her laptop. The calls she had mentioned came and went. She took them standing at the window, her voice precise and measured, a different voice than the one she used in this room. Howard kept his eyes on his work and his ears to himself. When the migration finished, he installed the new partition, ran the diagnostics twice, and booted the system. It came up clean. "You're back," he said. Beverly ended a call and came to look. She sat in her chair, navigated through the system with the methodical efficiency of someone who has been using computers for a long time and has no patience for the ones that don't cooperate. She opened several programs, checked her files, said nothing for a moment. Then, "Everything's here. Should be," Howard said. "I pulled the data before I touched anything else." She looked at him. "You didn't have to do it that way." "I know," he said. He began packing his bag, wipes, spare drive, the tools in their specific order. He did not hurry. He never hurried at the end of a job. There was a right way to leave a place and a wrong way, and he had learned early which was which. He was almost done when Beverly spoke again. "Mr. Bassett." He looked up. She was still at her desk, her hands flat on the surface, her eyes on the window, not on him. She said it the way someone says a thing they have been deciding whether to say for the last 20 minutes. "That photograph on your lock screen." A pause. "Is your daughter's mother in her life?" Howard set the last tool in the bag. He didn't answer right away. He took the moment the question deserved. "She passed," he said, 4 years ago. Beverly did not say she was sorry. He appreciated that. Most people said they were sorry and then didn't know what to do with the silence that followed. Beverly just let the silence be what it was. "Lily remembers her," he said after a moment. "Some things. The smell of her shampoo, The sound of her laugh, she holds onto those. He paused. I'm glad she does. Beverly was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the city moved through its afternoon without them. My husband left 6 years ago, she said. He said I was married to the job. Another pause. He wasn't wrong. Howard looked at her. She was still looking at the window. Do you regret it? He asked. I regret how I handled it, she said, not what I built. She said it without drama, the way someone states a fact they have made peace with through long and difficult acquaintance. But some mornings I come in here and I stand at that window and I think about whether the thing I built was worth the shape it left in my life. Howard nodded. He knew that particular shape. It had a different name in his life, but it had the same edges. Does it help? He said. Thinking about it, Beverly turned from the window then and looked at him. Really looked, the appraisal gone, something else in its place. No, she said simply. But I do it anyway. He zipped his bag closed. He straightened up. They stood in the room together for a moment, in a silence that was different from the one he had walked into, less carefully maintained, more like the kind that settles between two people who have said more than they planned to. Thank you, Beverly Crane said. She meant the computer. Or perhaps she meant more than the computer. It was the kind of sentence that could hold more than one thing. Glad it worked out, Howard said. He picked up his bag. He crossed the office. He was nearly at the door. Mr. Bassett. He stopped, turned. Beverly Crane was still behind her desk. Her hands were still flat on the surface. She was looking at him with an expression he had not seen from her before. Open, slightly uncertain, like a window cracked on a cold day. That photo, she said. The one of your daughter at the lake. She stopped, started again. She looked completely free. Howard waited. Is that what it's like? She said. When you do it right, the question was quiet, not a CEO asking it. Just Beverly. Just a person who had spent a great many years in rooms like this one and was wondering, with the particular honesty of someone who has stopped performing for the afternoon, whether something had been missed. Howard Bassett thought about Lily in her yellow swimsuit, laughing at something he had said. Something that hadn't even been that funny, he'd thought at the time. But she had laughed anyway, that real laugh she had, the one that came from somewhere unguarded. He thought about the drive home that day with the windows down, her foot dangling out the back window, despite his half-hearted objection, the radio on something she hated but sang along to anyway. Sometimes, he said, when you pay attention. Beverly Crane looked at him for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. Not dismissal, but acknowledgement, the kind that has weight in it. Howard walked to the elevator. He pressed the button. He waited. Behind him, through the closed door of Suite 3201, he heard nothing. But when he stepped into the elevator and the doors slid closed and the car began to descend toward the city below, he had the sense, the way you sometimes do, that the silence he had left behind was a different quality than the one he had found. He thought about that on the drive home. He thought about it when Lily ran out the front door in her socks and told him she had decided that clouds didn't have feelings, but they probably had opinions. He thought about it later when the house was quiet and he was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone lukewarm, the way it always did when he forgot to drink it. He was not a man who reached for things. He had not been built that way. Or perhaps he had been built that way once and had been rebuilt into something more careful. But he found himself thinking, in the specific quiet of his kitchen at 9:30 on a Wednesday evening, about a woman standing at a window on the 32nd floor, looking at a city she had built a life inside, asking whether she had done it right. He did not have an answer for her. He was not sure anyone did. But he thought, and this surprised him, that the asking of it was its own kind of beginning. That there was something in having asked it, in the particular way she had asked it, that made him think she had not stopped paying attention. That she was, in spite of everything the 32nd floor required of her, still looking. His phone sat on the table. He looked at it for a moment. He did not pick it up. But he thought he might sometime. Not today, not this week, maybe. But sometime when the moment felt right and honest, the way moments occasionally did if you were patient enough to wait for them. Outside, the night settled over Millhaven the way it always did. Unhurried, unbothered, indifferent to the distance between a town like this and a floor like that. Lily slept in her room down the hall, probably dreaming about clouds. Howard finished his tea, cold now, and sat for a while longer in the quiet of the house they shared. The two of them, doing all right in the particular way that people do when they have found small, reliable things to hold on to and have learned, through practice, to hold them carefully.